Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. I'm joined today by Joanne. Joanne, can you please introduce yourself and share a little bit about what you're doing?
Yes, my name is Dr. Joanne Hebert, and I have spent the last few years researching work arrangements prior to the pandemic, during the pandemic, and post-pandemic, measuring job satisfaction among employees at different levels, from the executives to professional employees.
And what have you found about the impact of flexibility and remote work on job satisfaction?
Well, there's a differing difference of a perception and opinions between executive and managers and lower level employees. So with
Hmm.
executives, flexibility is not as important as it is for managers and lower level employees.
Hmm.
Executives want more in-office presence. Managers and professional employees prefer more flexibility and actually prefer working remote over hybrid or on-site.
Okay, that's interesting. Why do you think the what explains this difference from what you found?
Well, a lot has to do with their profession and what they do,
Hmm.
their actual job. And this is knowledge workers, so people who think for a living, and they are in the marketing and research and sales sector, which is
Hmm.
largely accommodating for people that prefer remote work. So they don't need to be in the office to complete their jobs. They do
Hmm.
research, they do surveys, they interact with clients globally using Zoom and other tools. So
Hmm.
their jobs, they don't need to be in the office. However, at the executive level, they perceive that I call it proximity bias, where they perceive employees
Hmm.
are more productive when they can see them in the office. And even though there's no evidence showing that there's higher productivity on site, executives still want more in office presence from employees. So there's this disconnect between levels, and it's causing reduced job satisfaction among managers and lower level employees.
That's interesting. So I wrote an article for Harvard Business Review about proximity bias. I was finding that managers definitely have a preference and tend to promote people more who are present more often in the office, not simply executives. So I want to understand a little bit more about the perspective of managers in particular, what you found regarding proximity bias for managers.
Actually, in this study, the proximity bias among managers was very low because
Hmm.
they were on the same page as lower level employees. There was a discrepancy. Like I said, executives were the ones that said they felt the employees were more productive
Hmm.
in the office. Managers felt they were more productive remote, and their subordinates were who were the professional employees, lower level, felt more productive remote. So it was only the
Hmm.
top layer that was advocating for more on-site presence, even though in the surveys, when they
Hmm.
cited the employees, what they preferred, they all came back, 80% of them to 90% came back that they wanted to stay remote. They had been remote for 5 years since the onset of the pandemic.
Hmm.
And they were very surprised when they came back and they implemented a policy that required 2 days on site, three
Hmm.
days at home. So it
Hmm.
was totally misaligned with what they wanted, and it they
Hmm.
felt like their voices weren't heard, and it has really impacted their job satisfaction, their
Hmm.
morale, increased turnover. So it's caused a detrimental effect across the organization. And
Hmm.
when the ultimate goal was to increase productivity, that's why they're doing it. But right now, the company is in a turmoil, and the
Hmm.
productivity is decreasing because people are unhappy and they don't
Hmm.
there's a lack of transparency. They don't feel like their voices were heard. So it's it's very interesting findings.
Mhm. Oh, that sounds really interesting. Tell me a little bit more about, in a sanitized way, of course, the nature of the company so that people understand more about the size of the company, the demographics, the kind of activities that the company does.
Yes, the company is a marketing and research consulting company that's global. And I was
Hmm.
specifically focused only on the North American sector, which included the United States and the United Kingdom and Canada. So my research, but it yes, it stemmed mostly with executives, managers, and lower level employees from the
Mhm.
North American sector in this small marketing and consulting firm.
Mhm. Tell me a little bit more about the process of your research. So it sounds like you did surveys. Tell me a little bit more about what exactly you did, how you approached this question.
Yes, I did. I did in-depth surveys across, there
Mhm.
was actually two organizations. There was the one I'm focusing on right now is the marketing and research, but I also did a marketing and sales company as well, which was
Mhm.
five male executives and managers. So the company that I'm referring to right now is the marketing and research company. And I did do in-depth interviews. There's a gap in the literature for qualitative research, especially
Mhm.
looking back and doing like a lived experience among a group of employees that have experienced the same life experience. So before the
Mhm.
pandemic, during the pandemic, and post-pandemic. So I
Mhm.
focused on these in-depth interviews and really trying to understand their lived
Mhm.
experiences, uh, capturing detailed, very detailed descriptive data. And I included it in my research. I included exact quotes so the
Mhm.
voices could be heard across employee
Mhm.
level. And some of them was very telling and many of them aren't positive, but I had to include them because that's what my
Sure.
research findings showed. And
Mhm.
it was very telling after I looked at the combination of all the perspectives and how it was almost like it wasn't groupthink, but it almost
Mhm.
came out like groupthink because everyone was saying the same thing
Mhm.
over and over. And even after I achieved saturation, I still kept interviewing people just to see if I would find anything different, and I didn't. It
Mhm.
still came back the same issues across the organization.
Mhm. How did the executives react to your findings?
Interestingly, their perceptions when I explained some of the findings that I had captured from their managers and lower level employees, they acted like they weren't surprised and
Mhm.
they actually said that they listened to their employees. They
Mhm.
included them in making the policy decision. And I also expressed to them that this was not what I heard from, their employees, that their voices weren't heard, and that's why they have low job satisfaction. But it didn't seem to really impact them that
Mhm.
much because their main goal is to increase sales in the organization and then
Mhm.
possibly to sell it to a private investment
Mhm.
equity firm. So they have a different agenda,
Mhm.
and that's what I found when talking to the upper executives. So their agenda is a little bit different. They're focused solely, I think, more on profitability,
Mhm.
increasing sales, and they didn't they're doing what's best to increase sales and they didn't prioritize the needs of employees, which is what employees want post-pandemic, especially coming out
Mhm.
of the COVID pandemic that changed people's
Mhm.
views about how they want to work and live in the
Sure.
future.
And so, do you think that coming to the back to the office increased sales?
No, I don't. I don't.
Okay.
No.
And
I think
so,
I think
go
coming
ahead.
back to the office is good for the culture, for mentoring, for
Mhm.
onboarding, for new employees that need to see how the office environment
Mhm.
works. But for employees that have independent job tasks and that are being
Mhm.
productive, working fully remote, not for those types of workers. But there is a
Mhm.
place for on-site as well. I found that in my study as well.
So, tell me a little bit more about what you found in that element. Who benefits from coming to the office?
Yes, I think for sure. And even a lot of the feedback came from senior managers and executives that they feel strongly that people that are entering the workforce, uh, that have that are new to the workforce, that have
Mhm.
never worked in an office, those are the type of people that can benefit for going into the
Mhm.
office because they really need to understand how the office works, build
Mhm.
relationships, the communication process,
Mhm.
one-on-one training, onboarding. It's much different when you're starting a new career and you're doing everything
Mhm.
100% remote. You don't gain those types of things, those types of
Mhm.
interactions, those hands-on learning that you would in a remote environment. So that is definitely, and I agree. I think that's it. That has being on site is so much more beneficial than being remote because learners do learn, there's different styles of learning. So if you
Mhm.
can take on site and remote and combine it in like a hybrid, you get the best of both types of interactions and learning. And that will
Mhm.
actually make you have a better training experience and increase your
Mhm.
sales and skills.
So tell me a little bit more about who they're learning from, because what I recall about, let's say, Salesforce said that, oh, bringing people to the office because we want our junior people to spend time in the office learning from the people who are more experienced. And so if the experienced people can afford to work remotely and get all their tasks done, but the junior people need to spend more time in the office to learn, who would the junior people be learning from if the senior people aren't there?
Yeah, so this was interesting. So they called everyone back, but they put a boundary. So if you lived within 60 minutes, you had to go back to the office 2 days of work. But
Mhm.
what they didn't do is they didn't coordinate the junior people with their management team. So you have managers going into the office and all of their subordinates who live an hour and a half away or in remote environment. So
Mhm.
how this was the disconnect that we found in the study. Like, how are
Mhm.
these subordinates going to learn when their managers are being forced to go into the office 2 days a week, but their subordinates are working remotely? The whole purpose of having this on-site policy was to
Mhm.
bring people together.
Mhm.
However, they had a flexible policy which didn't mandate days in the office and also
Mhm.
didn't take into consideration the leader subordinate relationship and how these
Mhm.
people are going to excel.
Okay. And so you found that that's undermined. Tell me a little bit more about the impact of that approach. What kind of impact did it have?
Well, it's the policy that they implemented is not going to be effective because it didn't
Mm-hmm.
take into consideration bringing people into the office to mentor and onboard them to build the culture because they told them come in any 2 days a week that you want.
Mm-hmm.
So you have people there on all different days. And then they didn't coordinate their, like I said, the managers, the leaders with their subordinates. So it's not going to work. They're going to have to change the policy if they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to truly achieve the goals that they set out to achieve.
Okay. So that helps me understand a little bit more about where you're coming from and your research. Tell me whether you think the leadership executive team will change anything based on what you found and what you presented to them.
I think they will end up going to a fixed day policy
Mm-hmm.
because they're going to find that when they go in, and I don't know how often they go in, I don't think they're going in to the office every week. So that's another issue. So the executives are working remotely and not coming into the office as often as they should. So they're not seeing what's truly going on in the office. But for my research, when I talked to the managers who
Mm-hmm.
said, all I'm doing is driving an hour there and an
Mm-hmm.
hour back to sit in another cubicle. None of my team is there. So I think when that message gets across, which it is in my paper, that upper executives will probably go to a fixed policy because they'll find out that it's more beneficial for the organization, for the managers, and for the lower level employees.
Interesting. So when I work with companies, what I usually recommend that they do, and it works out best, is that they do a team-based model where each team decides what works best for them within certain broad guidelines. So rather than having a fixed day policy, that helps the different teams make different decisions about what they need. So for example, a sales team might meet together in the office at the beginning of a sales process, if it's a long sales process, and then come together again closer to the close, spend more time in the office, and other times when they're doing lead research or something like that, spend more time working remotely. Whereas something like IT team might have a different, might get together at the beginning of a project, a lean sprint, and then get together in another 2 weeks at the end of a lean sprint. So you have different time needs, spending time in the office. Also, for that allows them company to downsize their office space in a more effective way when because teams can coordinate about which days to come in, which days to not come in, and so that helps decrease the overhead. So I'm curious, it's curious to me that you're advocating a fixed policy for everyone on the same days.
Well, I guess, for me, the alternative was they said that they wanted to maintain the employees' flexibility. However,
Mm,
flexibility without structure is not going to lead to productivity. So there's a couple things that need to be done. As I said, I mean, there's a disconnect between, having everyone in the office and
mhm,
collaborating with your team. So I I think your approach is also very well. I would take that into consideration as well because every team, like you said, is different. Although the
mhm,
in talking to this group of individuals, it seems like they are all aligned on project management and completing projects. So, but the teams are different. They have different goals, different
mhm,
timelines. So yes, I I'm not 100% sure, but there has to be some change in the policy with this 100% flexibility policy. It's just not
mhm,
feasible.
yeah.
It's not going to work. But I think your approach is also very valid and justified.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% flexibility with certain limited days per week it just doesn't work very well. One of my clients, the Information Sciences Institute, said they allowed me to talk about them. They were written up in the New York Times Magazine for this. They started with that approach, and then they found that people were coming into the office at random times. They didn't have any contacts, and so that didn't work out. Then we switched to a team-based model, and then teams got together in the office. They also had certain anchor days where they encouraged people to come in and gave people lunch and breakfast on certain days. Like, I mean, I think it was Thursday lunch, Tuesday breakfast. And so that was a natural anchor without like forcing people, so incentivizing people. So that turned out to be a quite good approach for them.
Yes, and the research does support my research that I found in the last couple of years does support more of a fixed day policy with being in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and then working at home Monday and Friday. That's what I
Mhm,
found in my research. But this is all new post pandemic, and people organizations are trying to figure out what works best for them. And now at the same time, you're having increased office in office presence. So it's hard for corporations to figure out which way to go because you're having upper
mhm,
leaders, with the Trump administration bringing people back to the
mhm,
office, and they're advocating, no, we want you back in the office, higher productivity. And then you have other companies that want to have a hybrid policy, yet
mhm,
there's so many variables that they have to consider. So it's a little risky for them. So they're in the state
mhm,
of flux right now, and that's why I think this research is so important for them because they have to figure
mhm.
out what works best for them, what can drive productivity for that organization.
That makes a lot of sense. As we finish up, are there any last words that you want to share?
No, thank you very much for letting me come and talk about this. I think it's cutting edge information during a time of change in post-pandemic workplaces. And, I think it would be insightful for executives, managers, and lower level
Mhm.
employees to, learn about it a little bit more.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Joanne. I appreciate you joining me.
Thank you.
And thank you to the audience for checking out another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to subscribe wherever you checked out the show and leave a review. It helps other people discover the show and helps us improve the show. And if you have any questions, email me at gleb, Gleb, at disasteravoidanceexperts.com.